Hello, computer science students. Welcome back for the second video in our classes series. This video is going to cover writing a method and creating an object from our class using the default constructor. So to start with, let's dive into probably the trickier topic, which is how to create a method. And in particular, we're going to create a method called toString. So when writing classes, the fields or member variables are what information your class can store. The methods describe what can your class do. And the first thing you need to do when you create a method is use the keyword either public or private. There is technically another keyword called protected, which we will not dive into today. In fact, we probably won't touch on it throughout the whole course. But public and private we will. And in fact, I am going to amend my code from video 1 with a couple pieces of information I should have used there as well. So these public and private modifiers, what do they mean? So public is a keyword. That means the thing that I write afterwards is being written in this class, but I want it to be visible and accessible in other classes. In this case, that would be the tester class. So public means I would like the tester class to be able to see and use the method that I write here. Private means I would not like the tester class to be able to see and use what I'm writing here. We'll dive into the specifics and the details behind this and why you might want one or the other later. But for now, we're going to follow a general rule of thumb for this course. And that rule of thumb is if you have fields or member variables, you're going to declare them as private. And the reason for this is that these are going to store important information, and we want to limit how you can assign new things or get information from this class by defining methods that control what happens here. For example, we might force you to only win one game at a time instead of just setting or we might require that games won is less than games played, and that might be built into a method. But if we allow these to be public, then that means we could access them directly in our tester class, and our tester could create a team and then set its games won equal to 20 and games played equal to 2, and that could cause other problems and concerns. And so generally it's a good rule of thumb to make your member variables for your class or your fields for your class private. The public keyword we will mostly use for methods. So this allows us to control what our object does. And so we're going to make a public method here. And in the toString method, and actually in any method, the next thing that you type is your return type. So what information do we get out? What information do we get out of our method? When we call it, when we create a team and call the method, what information should it give? Well, this toString method is supposed to give information about the team. It's basically supposed to turn it into a string. Turn this team, this object team, into a string that summarizes all the important information. So it's going to return a string. So it's going to be public string, and then the method name, toString. And then in parentheses are the information I need. So that's why we have public string toString and nothing in parentheses. When we write this method, we don't actually need any information. In order to convert a team to a string, all we need is the knowledge of the information stored in our class. We don't need anything external. So this toString method I already gave you as a comment to make it a little bit easy, but I wanted to walk through and describe. Let me real quickly, since this is here, go ahead and copy this. For our first method, I thought I'd help with writing things a little bit neater. Now, there's a couple intentional bugs here that we're going to work with. So this toString method returns a string, right? That's a thing in quotes. And so I've kind of spaced it out over a couple lines. You could jam this all together if you want to, but this is also a good time to remind you or inform you that in Java, unless you have a semicolon, your line has not ended. So In situations like this where you're adding things together with plus signs, I could have one giant mess of a string that goes off the end, um, but that's messy and hard to read. But as long as I don't have a semicolon, I can also just divide it up across a number of different lines, and it will be the same thing. So that works. Now the problem with the version I gave you here and the version I've created for this video is that the variable names don't necessarily match up. I did call name, but when I created this class in this example before, I called team location just location. The important thing I want to highlight here is that when I'm calling this toString method, it has to refer to variables, and specifically variables in this class, these fields or these member variables that I've created. And so when you write a sentence like this, when you create a string like this that says team location equals, and you want to print it, name equals, you want to print it, games equal, you want to print it, wins equal, and you want to print it, you need to make sure that the thing you want to print matches the variable names that you've created in your class. So this might actually be team location. This could be games played, and this could be games won. Now, it's not all that important what these variable names are, other than that A, they make some sense, and B, the member variables are the same as the references to them here. So now that we have matched up our names, whether we call them location or names or games or wins or whatever we want to call them, they match up, and that's the important part. So this is our first method. It's now complete. When we call it, it will return this string, which we can see. So let's see it. Let's actually run it and see what it prints and make sure it looks okay. So to actually run code, we need to write it in our public static void main. Now, it's generally common practice to have a tester class of some sort that runs and creates objects from your other class. The key here is that both these classes are in the same project. So when I create a team object like Elon, it knows to look for this team class. Java knows to look for this team class within the same project. And so it finds that, yeah, this team class is in here, and so I can make a team object. Now, I have my team object Elon. It doesn't really do anything yet except return a string. And return a string of what? We'll find out. So let's do a system.out.println. And let's try to call the toString method. Now to call a method, we created the object in line 6, team Elon equals new team. And now we want to call a method on it, so we're going to use Elon, the variable name, dot toString, open and close parentheses, with nothing in parentheses because there are no arguments here. So let's go ahead and run this. All right. And what did we get out? Well, it printed team square bracket location equal null, name equal null, games equal 0, wins equal 0. Okay. Well, team square bracket location equals team location, comma name equals name, comma games equal games played, and wins equal games won. So what we've printed is the string that we showed here, and it's inside a print statement so that it actually prints out. And so this is, one thing you may note is we didn't create a constructor. So when we make a team, what happens is Java finds all of our member variables and it assigns them to a default value. This is determined by Java, and it turns out the default value for a string is null. Null means nothing. It's a string with nothing in it. So it's an empty string and an empty string, kind of. Really, it's a null string, which is slightly different. So we have two null strings for team location and name. And then games played, so integers, are initialized to 0. That is their default value. And so when we created this class, it set everything to its default value and then printed it. And so that should be a good intro to how do I create an object from a class I made, what happens when I do that, and how do I call a method from that class. So these are core concepts in class creation and creating objects from classes. So hopefully you found this useful and interesting, and we will move on next time to talk about a custom constructor. Maybe we don't want it to be possible for null teams to be in our database, and so maybe, or to be stored, and so maybe we need to set a constructor to force a location and a name to be given when we create our team. So we will dive into that next time.